Okay, so the vertex is -1, -4. The axis of symmetry is always the x value, and this is facing up, so the vertex is a minimum, and that's at the y value. And the domain of every parabola every time is all real numbers. And if you were going to see this in a multiple choice question, you might see it -infinity to infinity, right? Those would be the same thing. And the range here would be bottom to top. So the bottom this time is -4 to infinity. And the -4 is always my k value, okay? So the range always goes with the y value. And if it's bottom like this, the -4 goes first. But if it was upside down, like this, then it would be -infinity to -4. It would be backwards. Okay? So if they're facing down, the -infinity comes first. If it's facing up, the -4 goes first to infinity. The y-intercept is 0, -3. My x-intercepts, okay, any questions? Oh yeah, the transformations. What are the transformations here? This vertex should be right here. So it got shifted 1 to the left and 4 down. Okay, so number 2 is standard. Jack. Number 2 is standard. So there's a couple things you get from standard form. So first of all, how do I find the vertex? Because you can't find the vertex easily with standard form. So how do I find this? Well, Mrs. Archer, I would do -b over 2a if I were you, Mrs. Archer, because that'll give you the x of your vertex. So my -b would be minus the -10, which is a positive 10, over 2 times -1, which is -2. So the x of my vertex is -5, which makes the axis of symmetry -5. And once I get the -5, can I put this in here then and get the y value for the vertex? And that's what I would do. I would take y equals negative and you get 9. So then it asks for the y-intercept. And the y-intercept, if you put 0 in, what do you get for y-intercept? 0, 0, -16. So next is vertex form. And you need 3 things for vertex form. I need my A, my H, and my K. Well, this is my H, and this is my K. And where do I get the A in standard form? It's in front of the x squared, right? So what's the A this time? So if A is -1, when I fill this in, so that gives me vertex form. Now how do I find the x-intercepts? You're all going to fail. We're going to factor. What we've been doing for like a million weeks now. Don't make that surprise face back there. Factor. So I can't factor a negative, right? So I'm going to take out the negative 1. So when I do the t-chart, I have 16 and 10, which is going to be 8 and 2. So what does that make my actual 8 equal to? If I set that equal to 0, it's negative 8, right? So this is negative 8 and 0, and this is negative 2 and 0. All right, what form is the next one? What can you get from this form right here? I can get the vertex. So the vertex is negative 6, negative 4, which makes my axis of symmetry negative 6. What's the A value? 1. So if the A value is 1, is this a min or a max? Min, and it's at y equals negative 4. The domain of every parabola every time. All real numbers, or negative infinity to infinity. Since this is the minimum, I know that my parabola looks something like that. And so the range is going to be the k value to infinity, right? Because this is the minimum. So the k value is negative 4 to infinity. And the y-intercept is if you make the x 0. So if I make the x 0, so I get 36 minus 4, which is going to be 32. Now set this equal to 0 and solve for x. Are you kidding me? So hopefully when you solve for x, it looks something like how I solved for x. So negative 6 plus 2 gives me negative 4, and negative 6 minus 2 gives me negative 8. So to graph it, I'm going to put the vertex, which is minus 6 minus 4. I'm going to put the minus 4, the minus 8. Because the y-intercept is 0, 32. It's way high. So what are the transformations? Right, this vertex should have been right here. So it's 6 to the left and 4 down. Okay. They're right here. Well, if you have the R1 and R2, you have the x-intercepts. That's all the same thing. Who's throwing things? Oh, did you kill it? Good job. So this x-intercept is 4, and this one is negative 8. So when I do R1 and R2, and that gives me my x, I'm going to get 4 minus 8 over 2. So that's negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. You got that? Okay. So that makes this negative 2 and this, correct? So now I need the y value. So what do you think I'd do with that negative 2? Right. So if I put it in, I have negative 3, and then I have minus 2 minus 4, which gives me negative 6, and negative 2 plus 8 gives me positive 6. Jack, are you awake over there? You're looking sleepy. Gives me 108. And the y-intercept, if I put 0 in, it's 0 and 96. So on number 5, on the completing the square, before I can start, there's a greatest common factor. What's the greatest common factor? 2. So if I divide by 2, so now I'm going to only do what's in the parentheses. And I keep the x's on one side, and I'm going to move the 3 to the other side. And this is the one where you do the b over 2, and b over 2 squared. So the b this time is negative 4. B over 2 is negative 2. And b over 2 squared is a positive 4. So the very first step I'm going to do is b over 2 squared. So I'm going to add the 4. What I do to one side, I also have to do to the other. And then I'm going to write this as a perfect square. And the hint that I'm going to do that, you see this parentheses with squared? That's what goes on your next step. And the only thing I haven't used then is the b over 2. And the b over 2 is x minus 2. And negative 3 plus 4 is 1. And how do I get rid of the squared? On both sides. So I get x minus 2 equals plus or minus 1. So when I add the 2 to the other side, I get 2 plus or minus 1. So x is 3 and x is 1. Okay. I'm going to give you the answers to the next 2, and you work them and see if you get the right answers. All right, everybody look at 11 and 12. What kind of factoring is that? Perfect square, right? So that means I'm going to get 1 plus and 1 minus. So what's the square root of 4? 2x and 2x, and the square root of 49? 7 and 7. So if I set 2x plus 7 equal to 0, I'm going to subtract the 7 and divide by 2. So the x is negative 7 over 2. And if I do the same thing with 2x minus 7, I get a positive 7 over 2. So all of you do the next one, which is exactly the same. So you should have gotten a plus and a minus 5/3. Did you get that, Jack? Thank heaven. How about you, Andrew? Oh, thank heaven. Okay, I'm going to work number 9 because that's the hardest of the ones that are left, but they're all the same. All 3 of those are the same. So the first thing, what are they? They all have to be equal to 0, right? And I want the x squared to stay positive. So I'm going to subtract the 24x and add the 18. So the x squared stays positive and it's equal to 0. And next, do they have a common factor? What would it be? So that means I'm going to divide by 6. So when I make my t-chart, I use, after I take the 6 out, so I have 3 and -4. And 3 only has 2 factors, which is 1 and 3. So it's -1 and -3. So if I put that in my parentheses, this one doesn't have a variable, so I don't get an answer from that one. How about this one? What's the x equal to here? 1 and 3. So you factor, and you should end up with -5 and 4, and, this one, if I take a times c, I get -48 and 2, which gives me 8 and -6. But what goes in the parentheses? What's the leading coefficient this time? It's 16, right? It's not a 1 this time. This time it's a 16x plus 8 and 16x minus 6. And you have to reduce these and get your answers then. And if you do that, you end up with